I'm talking with Josh McFarlin today. He spoke at the Southeast Collision Conference and talked about how you can keep ADAS calibrations in-house. I got a lot of questions for him, which I think you'll have the same ones. Hear what he has to say.
Welcome to Body Bangin', your podcast for all things body. Auto body, that is. And now, introducing Body Bangin's host, Mickey Woods of Mickey Woods Marketing. Mickey is a former auto collision center owner and is now a marketing and business development expert to shops across the globe.
Hello, and welcome back to today's episode of the Body Bangin' podcast. We are at the Southeast Collision Conference in Richmond, Virginia, and we are talking today with Josh McFarlin. He's with AirPro. We're going to talk a little bit about ADAS calibrations, but first, we're going to make sure we thank our sponsor, Lombard Equipment. You can purchase equipment from them. They do training, full service with great customer service. We want to make sure we thank them. So, Josh, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did you know what you were getting yourself into today with this?
I did not. No, but I trust you're going to tell me.
It's too late. You can't leave now.
Yeah, I'm here now.
Yes. So, Josh, today you're having a class. It's going to be a little bit later today.
That's
on
right.
Keeping ADAS calibrations in-house, correct?
Right. Absolutely.
So we do have Frank Turlip also talking about ADAS calibrations, but that's like doing it in a separate center. I think it's great you're talking about keeping it in-house because there are a lot of shops that are concerned about the calibration situation and how it's going to fit in with what they're doing. Is
Right.
that kind of what you're going to be touching on?
Yeah, I guess my point is not subletting it out to someone else.
Okay.
So there's a number of different ways to go about that.
Okay.
And it's not a one size fits all approach.
Right.
So how one person is doing it does not necessarily mean that's the way you need to be doing it. But the
Right.
point is, and I've got nothing against dealers and someone else's calibration center, et cetera.
Mhm.
But giving them the business means you're giving up control of the cycle time, the
Right.
quality control, the profit, the cost, right?
Mhm.
You're giving up control of all of that. And why?
Yes.
You can be doing some or all of it. I don't care what size your shop is.
So what do you feel like when shops say they're too busy, they don't have space, they don't have the proper technicians? I'm sure you hear that.
Absolutely. I honestly and candidly, they're making excuses.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, how's that different than aluminum repair
Mhm.
with F-150s, 8 years ago,
True.
right?
True.
It's a new hurdle. It's
It
a
is.
new thing they got to figure out.
Yeah.
It's no different than waterborne. It's no different than, let's go back 40 years and talk about, unicides and getting away from body on frame construction.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's a new thing that they have to deal with, but it's part of the process. It is part of repairing the vehicle correctly. And if you're depending on someone else to do it, I believe that's a weak link in your repair center technology, your repair center approach.
Now, I know, and again, this is recorded. So if there's something that I say you don't want to answer, feel free to shut me up. So we
Okay.
can cut it out.
Yeah, that's fine. I appreciate that.
So I know a lot of shops send their calibrations to the dealerships, and you had mentioned that. Or even if they were to send it out to another center, do you know where the liability would fall then if there was ever an issue with the calibration that's done? If, let's say, they drop it to a shop and then the shop sublets it out, where does the liability land?
With the shop that's performing the repair on the vehicle. Absolutely. With the initial customer. Okay, so if it's Josh's Auto Body that took the keys from the customer, they own the liability. 100%. Now, you might find that dealer or the ADAS calibration center or somebody may take on some small percentage of that.
Yeah.
Right. Or you may be able to go back and I'm not going to get into the legal terms because I'm not going to use the right one. And I'm not the lawyer in this situation.
Right.
But you may get them to share in that responsibility in some way.
Okay.
But I guarantee you're going to be the one sitting in the first chair at the defendant's table.
Right.
Okay. you're not gonna get somebody else to sit in the first chair. You'll be sitting at the first chair.
I think that's something that's really important in all of
Absolutely.
that I don't think people are thinking about potentially.
And that's true in every state across the country. Like that's 100%. Like I'm not aware of any exceptions to that.
Interesting. Okay. So now where would a shop start with all of it? Because it is a complicated new process that,
Sure.
And there is specific training, just like if you're getting certified for, Jaguar Land Rover, you have to go to their specific training. So I assume it's something similar. Or do you find shops are hiring somebody entirely new to take over this component, or are they giving additional training to somebody already on staff?
So I start here. I start with the question of, are you doing pre and post scans? Are you doing diagnostics?
Okay. Yeah.
At this point,
right,
in this industry, I think most of the shops that are sitting here having a conversation about what should I be doing for calibrations, will say, yes, I'm doing something for diagnostics. Are they doing everything they should be? Maybe not, but they're doing something.
Okay.
Which means they either have a partner or they have a tool.
Mm-hmm.
If they have a partner or they have a tool, odds are they have a path to be able to perform the calibration. As far as the tool is concerned, the software side of it.
Yes.
Okay. So there's a software and there's a hardware component to calibrations.
Okay.
And the hardware side of it is targets. The software side of it is the diagnostic tool.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you can get into the weeds on the software side and say, well, does the tool have the capability? But let's not get that far into the weeds right now. Let's just assume that the tool is going to. Because more often than not, if it's a capable tool, it's going to have it. Or it can be made to have it. So, you just have to upgrade it to the next level or something.
Okay.
But you're doing diagnostics. That means you can get there. Okay. So even if you have to augment a little bit what you have for tooling, you can get there. Okay. So now dynamic calibrations. Let's leave staticals alone. Let's leave radar alone. Dynamic, all you have to do with the tool is trigger it in the software and go drive it.
Okay.
So unless you live in LA or New York or in the heart of Minneapolis or some other major metro area, getting out and doing the dynamic is not a big headache.
Okay.
Just go out and read the service information, understand what the requirements are, and go perform the dynamic calibration. It's a matter of driving the vehicle. That applies for most of your domestics and some Europeans. And that gives you a good percentage of your work mix where you're going to be doing the dynamic calibrations. Okay, so now you've got your feet wet. You're doing dynamic calibrations. You're a percentage of the way there. By looking at your work mix, you're going to know what that percentage is, but you're already doing it and you haven't made any investment and you don't need any space for that.
Right. Good point. Yeah.
I haven't had to deal with level floors or lighting or what color the walls are or anything.
Right.
All I've done is I've taken a tool I already have, a person that was already using it. Maybe it was a mobile person. Maybe it was my remote diagnostics provider like AirPro, right?
Right.
Whatever. But I can now go start doing dynamics instead of sending it to the dealer.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a big deal. And by the way, you should probably already be road testing your vehicles anyhow, right?
Right.
So add this in as a component of that. It's a little bit more complicated road test.
Yeah.
It's more than just driving it around the block to see if it rattles or vibrates, right?
Right.
But you can do that. Okay, so now you're dealing with dynamic calibrations. You're in the game.
Right.
Okay. So next step with minimal space requirements and minimal costs is add radar to that. You can deal with blind spot. You can deal with forward facing and a few others. You can get a kit from us for $1,000. That's a universal kit. And you have the hardware. Again, it'll work with whatever software solution you have.
Okay.
As long as it can trigger it, it'll work. And space requirements are still pretty limited. You can do it indoors or outdoors. It requires a relatively level floor. It's not the same as forward-facing camera. It's not nearly as sensitive to that.
Okay.
So it's more accommodating, if you will.
Right.
The space requirements aren't as significant.
Right.
And so you can get into radar. Radar is almost every time you take a bumper. How often do we take bumpers off?
Yeah, all the time.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you think about how often you're taking a bumper off, and now or a grill, right?
Yeah.
Because the forward-facing radar is either behind the grill or the bumper,
right?
And if you think auto emergency braking from what year forward is 100% penetration, and it's either behind the bumper or the grill, so it's there,
right?
And it needs a calibration,
right?
Like there's no debating it. It needs a calibration.
Yeah.
So why not? Why aren't we adding that into the mix instead of sending that down the road and subletting it to someone else?
Right.
Okay. And again, low cost of entry, not a terribly complicated setup process,
right?
Not a big space requirement. It doesn't require all the other environmental conditions of the color on the walls, color of the floor, lighting. Those things aren't factors. You can technically get away with it outside. It's just not as complicated. So what you're left with is static calibrations. That's generally where it gets a bit more complicated.
Okay.
That's where you start talking about Autel kits or Bosch kits or True Points or Mosaics or whatever. But let's say that you want to get around all of that, and I'm going to put my sales hat on for just a moment.
Okay.
Because we have a solution for that. We have Augie. Augie sits on the windshield, and it performs a static calibration for a forward-facing camera.
Okay.
It doesn't require any space requirements. I can do it inside. I can do it outside. It doesn't matter if the floor is level. Doesn't matter how much fuel is in the tank.
Wow.
Doesn't matter if it's daylight or raining. None of those conditions matter. If it's pouring out, I can't do it. But outside of it pouring, it doesn't matter what the conditions are.
Wow.
It takes everything else out of the equation.
Wow.
Now you're going to ask me next. I'll save you the trouble. Is it OEM approved? It is not.
Yeah.
But neither is Autel or Bosch or OptiAim or True Point outside of Rivian and Lucid, right? None of these systems are, because and that's not a reflection on those tools. I'm not saying anything negative about any of those other products.
Right.
Those tools aren't approved by the OEMs because the OEMs aren't in the business of going out and approving third-party solutions.
True.
They come to the market with a solution and then they have one.
Right.
They don't look for second and third and fourth solutions.
Right.
So they have one, they're done. They move on to their next problem to solve.
Yeah.
So my point is, start with dynamic with no additional investment if you're doing diagnostics.
Right.
Move into radar with minimal additional investment. And then if you want to get to static, you can come our way and we can help you get there at a pretty low cost. I mean, the retail price of an Augie is $7,300, which is less than any other target system in the marketplace. And we can do it in whatever environment you want to do it. We can do it mobile.
So what about now the first two that you were talking about, like the dynamic and then doing radar, that type of thing? How do the OEs feel about, I assume those are tools that you're providing?
We can, absolutely.
Okay.
But you can also use a snap-on scan tool. You can use an OE scan tool. You can work with Aztec or Opus. You can work with a mobile diagnostics provider, somebody that's coming to you. My point is keep it under your roof. You can use an Autel. There's any capable tool that will trigger that calibration.
Right.
It will allow you to get that job done. Bosch, OptiAim, right? Anything out there that'll do the job.
Now, how much extra time do you find it's adding to the actual repair to perform at least the first two, the simpler, I guess we'll call them, of the two?
So dynamic calibrations can be anywhere from 10 to, 45 minutes. I mean, it really kind of, it really depends on the shop location. It depends on the vehicle and the complexity of the test drive that's required.
Okay.
Right. So if you happen to be located adjacent to an open road that has all the right kind of conditions easily met, and this happens to be one of the OEMs that just requires, I'm going to make up an example, 40 miles an hour for 2 miles at a steady state. Yeah. You can achieve that pretty quickly. Right. If it's one that requires something a little bit more complex, that may take a little longer. So it varies. Okay. But it's not super complicated. Right. But you have to meet those conditions. It does require, generally a clear day. If it's a really overcast day, that might be a little tricky. If there's a bunch of snow on the ground, dynamic gets difficult. If there aren't any road signs or the lines are on the road are obscured, that makes it more difficult. So that's why dynamic can be trickier depending on where you're located, the time of year, things like that.
Yeah. Well, because I'm thinking to take away from the excuses, if we'll call them, the time is one of those. So 10, somewhere between 10 and 45 minutes, give me a break.
Yeah. Well, and listen, you should be getting compensated for that time.
100%.
100%. So you're adding time, but so let's talk about that time for a moment. If you're transporting that vehicle to the dealer, they're going to have to deal with that time.
That's
you're
going
to wait for that vehicle. You're going to wait for that vehicle to be in line at the dealer.
Right.
And then wait for them to let you know that it was done. And then you're going to have to go back and get it. Right. And then you're going to have to let it get back through your line to be ready for detail and final prep and whatever, right? To be finished in your process. So time, I don't know, that feels like a not very well thought out excuse. You know what I mean?
Because and I would assume that they, no matter who you take it to, they still have the same potential issues that you would have.
Absolutely. They're still in the same climate and the same and in the same environmental conditions, right? Yes. If you're in LA, they're in LA.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. So those problems still exist. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It's a new problem and it's complicated.
Yeah.
And so don't get me wrong. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm making light of the level of things that a body shop manager has to manage. There's a lot of things.
Right.
And this is one more.
Right.
But there's money to be made too. Profit margins, if they're doing this well, are not to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
They can make money at this. And they should be.
Right.
And that's what they're in business for, right? So there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And so lastly, I think it goes into and it starts to overlap with what Frank is talking about. And if you can hear him in the background, probably.
Oh, is that who that is? Yeah.
Yeah, that's Frank about 100 yards to my right.
Yeah.
Just starting his presentation. And so what he and I both are talking a little bit about is whether or not you keep it under your business or if you open a different shingle, right?
Right.
And so set aside whether or not you're going to try and service others in your community, others in your market.
Right.
The notion of, should I have a different shingle? Should I hang another shingle and sublet to that? No different than, I mean, how long have our partners in this industry been subletting to themselves for towing business?
Yeah.
That's not a new thing,
point.
Right?
Yeah.
How many people have had, like, I'd love to see a number. I don't know what this number is. Maybe you do, but how many collision repair shops in this industry have a towing business that is a separate LLC?
Yeah.
It's not a small number.
Right.
And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And it's not just because they wanted to have a tow truck and they felt like driving one, right? Like there's money there to be right. There's money there to be made.
Yeah.
Right. And so for very similar reasons, the ability to sublet to that and charge labor and be able to collect on invoices if you're working with a third party and things like that. I think there's real benefit to that. When you start working with a third party, and this is going to sound like I'm pitching AirPro, and it's a little bit self-serving, but that's not my motivation here. We have 150 technicians that do remote diagnostics and remote calibrations day in and day out. I don't have any of those remote technicians that I allow or want to work on more than 4 or 5 max brands at a time, in their wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Now the reason for that is they're dealing with third-party software and OE software day in and day out.
Yeah.
And the ability for them to be proficient and experts in that software and try and juggle multiple different software types and be experts in it.
Yeah.
And then add another one and another one and another one is not a practical expectation.
Right.
And so if I'm at Mickey's Body Bang and Body Shop, and expecting that I'm going to have one person manage 30 different brands,
right,
and know everything there is to know about the calibration process and the software for all of those different brands, especially if I'm going to be OE-centric on all of those brands. I don't think that's even close to a reasonable expectation.
No.
So you need to have a partner in some capacity.
Yeah.
Now, could you internalize some of those brands? Sure. Maybe you take a look at your work mix and you say, I'm going to pick the top 4 or 5.
Right.
And those are the ones where I'm going to buy the tooling.
Yes. That makes sense.
And I'm going to maximize my profits on those.
Right.
But the rest, I'm going to work with a partner.
Yes.
And I'm going to leverage their skill set for these others.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Right.
And I think the benefit of doing something like that is you've always got an expert working on the tool and working on the car.
Right.
As opposed to somebody that's just kind of a mile wide and an inch deep with their skill level,
Yeah. Good points.
Yeah.
Well, and I like what you talked about. I'm always, even when I do marketing for shops, it's always, let's walk into the pool rather than cannonball into the end. And I like your approach of, okay, if you're already doing this, then it's a natural progression to work your way into it. It's a lot less scary. It's a lot more practical rather than jumping into it and then you're totally overwhelmed and you're making mistakes. Now we've got a whole nother set of problems.
Right.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. Well, I think you've given people something to think about for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it will be interesting to see what shops choose to do moving forward. I think more people are going to start adopting this for sure.
I think it has to.
I think they do eventually. Right. I have clients that I work with that have done that and they've opened up their own separate calibration center. And holy cow, they're blowing up. They love it. They love it.
Absolutely.
There's really not a whole lot of competition either, which is great.
Yeah.
It's not like, I don't know which calibration center. Like, well, there's one. So
right.
Them, or the dealer,
Yeah, right.
I'm all for it. And I appreciate you getting snagged and coming on here with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think your session today is going to be great, I'm sure. And it was nice to meet you. We've never officially met. So
yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate you. Well, everybody, thanks for listening and stay tuned as we continue to interview people at the Southeast Collision Conference. And again, thank you to Lombard Equipment, who's our wonderful sponsor. See you next time.
If you enjoyed today's show, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We have some incredible topics and guests coming your way you will not want to miss. If you are watching on YouTube and don't want to miss the latest and greatest, you'll want to hit the bell after subscribing, so you will get a pop-up each time a video podcast goes live. To our devoted fans, would you mind paying it forward and sharing this little gem with someone else you think may benefit from it? Much love from all of us here at Body Bangin', all things auto body.